जी करे देखता रहूं।
क्या?
कितना प्यारा तुझे रब ने बनाया, कितना प्यारा तुझे रब ने बनाया। जी कर देखता रहूं, कितना सोना तुझे रब ने बनाया, कितना सोना तुझे रब ने बनाया। जी कर देखता रहूं। रब ने बनाया, जी कर देखता रहूं, कितना सोना तुझे रब ने बनाया। जी कर देखता रहूं। अंबर से आई है परियों की रानी, देख जिसे होती है सबको हैरानी। ओ अंबर से आई है परियों की रानी, देख जिसे होती है सबको हैरानी। सुंदर सा मुखड़ा है फूलों के जैसा, होगा ना दुनिया में कोई ऐसा।
कितना सीधा, कितना सच्चा मेरा राजा, कितना अच्छा। मुझको तो अच्छी लगती है तेरी हर नादानी, मुझको तो रब ने बनाया। जी कर देखता रहूं, कितना सोना तुझे रब ने बनाया। जी कर देखता रहूं। कोयल के जैसी है तेरी ये बोली, मूरत के जैसी है सूरत ये भोली। ओ कोयल के जैसी है तेरी ये बोली, मूरत के जैसी है सूरत ये भोली। बागों में जाओ ना दिल मेरा घबराए, पैरों में कांटा कोई हाय न चुभ जाए। मैं दीवानी हो ना जाऊं, तेरी बातों में खो ना जाऊं। उड़ता बादल बहता पानी बोले रुत मस्तानी, उड़ता बादल बहता पानी बोले रुत मस्तानी।
क्या?
सबसे प्यारा मेरा यारा राजा हिंदुस्तानी।
ने बनाया, कितना सोना तुझे रब ने बनाया, जी कर देखता रहूं।
तू है पागल, तू है जोकर, तू है दिलबर जानी, सबसे प्यारा मेरा यारा राजा हिंदुस्तानी।
कितना प्यारा तुझे रब ने बनाया, जी कर देखता रहूं। जी करे देखता रहूं।
जोकर।
परदेसी जाना नहीं, परदेसी परदेसी जाना नहीं, मुझे छोड़ के परदेसी मेरे यारा, वादा निभाना तुम याद रखना, कहीं भूल न जाना।
परदेसी परदेसी जाना नहीं, छोड़ के
हर पल मेरी याद तुम्हें तड़पाएगी, मैं जागूंगा नींद तुम्हें ना आएगी। हर पल मेरी याद तुम्हें तड़पाएगी, मैं जागूंगा नींद तुम्हें ना आएगी। छोड़ के ऐसे हाल में जो तुम जाओगे, सच कहता हूँ जान बहुत पछताओगे।
परदेसी मेरे यारा, मुझे ना रुलाना, तुम याद रखना कहीं भूल न जाना।
परदेसी परदेसी जाना नहीं, परदेसी परदेसी जाना नहीं। मुझे छोड़ के परदेसी मेरे यारा, वादा निभाना, मुझे याद रखना कहीं भूल न जाना।
परदेसी परदेसी जाना नहीं,
मुझे छोड़ के।
You already know AI can be wrong. You've probably heard the warnings. AI can hallucinate information. It can invent facts. It can misunderstand a question. And sometimes it can give you a completely wrong answer while sounding absolutely certain. But here's the strange part. Even when you know all of this, you can still find yourself trusting the answer. Why? Because your brain isn't judging AI the way you think it is. You're not always asking, is this information objectively true? Your brain is often asking a much faster question. Does this sound right? And AI is incredibly good at making information sound right. Think about what happens when you ask AI a question. You don't get a messy collection of search results. You don't have to open 20 different websites. You don't have to compare 5 conflicting explanations. You type a question, and seconds later, you get an answer that is organized, confident, readable, and specifically tailored to what you asked. Your brain loves that. Not necessarily because the answer is true, but because the answer is easy to process. And that is where the first psychological trap begins. Human brains rely on shortcuts constantly. We couldn't function without them. Imagine having to independently verify every single piece of information you encountered during the day. Every conversation, every advertisement, every headline, every recommendation, every fact. You'd never get anything done. So, your brain uses shortcuts to decide what can be accepted quickly. One of those shortcuts is called cognitive ease. When information feels easy to understand and process, it can feel more familiar and believable. And AI is extremely good at producing fluent information. It takes a complicated question and turns it into a clean explanation. It takes a confusing subject and organizes it into simple steps. It takes thousands of pieces of information and gives you one clear response. That feels useful. And it is useful. But there's a hidden psychological cost. The easier an answer is to process, the less mental resistance you feel. You don't necessarily stop and think, wait, where did this information come from? Instead, your brain can simply register. That makes sense. And that tiny difference matters, because something can sound completely reasonable without actually being correct. Think about how different this is from traditional research. When you search the internet yourself, you usually encounter friction. Different websites disagree. Some sources are unreliable. You have to compare. You have to decide. You have to think. AI removes much of that friction. It takes a complicated information problem and turns it into a conversation. And your brain naturally likes conversations. It likes answers, it likes patterns, it likes conclusions. Most importantly, it likes saving effort when saving effort doesn't appear dangerous. That's why the most dangerous AI answer isn't the obviously ridiculous one. If an AI tells you something completely absurd, you'll probably notice. You'll laugh, you'll question it, you'll search for another answer. But what if the answer sounds intelligent? What if it's detailed? What if it contains examples? What if it gives you several reasons that seem to support the conclusion? What if almost everything it says sounds familiar? Now the situation changes, because your brain doesn't need absolute certainty before it accepts something temporarily. It often just needs enough evidence to move forward. That's useful in everyday life. but it becomes risky when the information actually matters, and this is where another psychological shortcut enters the picture. Confidence. Imagine two people answering the same question. The first says, "I'm not completely sure." The second says, "The reason this happens is simple." Which person sounds more knowledgeable? The second one probably feels more convincing, but confidence and accuracy are not the same thing. An answer can sound certain and still be wrong, and AI can produce confident language without having human certainty behind it. It doesn't hesitate the way people do. It doesn't look nervous. It simply produces the next sentence. And when that sentence is clear, polished, and confident, your brain may interpret the quality of communication as evidence of quality information. That's a subtle mistake. But it's an important one, because AI doesn't have to convince you that it is perfect. It only has to make the answer feel credible enough that you don't bother checking, and you don't have to be gullible for that to happen. You can be highly educated. You can understand how AI works. You can know that AI sometimes hallucinates, and you can still fall into the same psychological shortcut. Because knowing a system can be wrong is not the same as questioning every answer, especially when you're busy, especially when you're tired, especially when you just want a quick answer. Your brain is constantly balancing two things, accuracy and effort. When something seems important, we slow down. But when it feels simple, familiar, and convenient, our brains allow shortcuts to take over. And AI is incredibly convenient. A question that once required 20 minutes of searching can now receive an answer in 20 seconds. That is an extraordinary advantage, but repeated convenience can change behavior. The more often AI gives you useful answers, the more familiar it becomes. The more familiar it becomes, the less unusual it feels to rely on it. And eventually, you may stop thinking about whether you should trust it. You simply use it. That's where the story becomes much more interesting. Because AI doesn't just give you information, it communicates with you. It can explain something again. It can apologize. It can sound encouraging. It can even appear to understand what you're trying to say. And when a machine starts communicating like a person, your brain can begin treating that interaction differently. Because the next trap isn't just about information, it's about something much more human, trust. And confidence is where the next trap begins. Think about the people you naturally trust. Maybe it's someone who speaks calmly, someone who seems knowledgeable, someone who answers questions without hesitation, someone who explains complicated things in a way that makes everything sound simple. Without realizing it, your brain may use confidence as a shortcut for competence. Not because confident people are always right. They aren't. But because confidence can be a useful social signal. If someone sounds certain, your brain may initially assume they know what they're talking about. That shortcut can save time. But with AI, there's a problem. AI can sound confident without actually knowing whether the information it is giving you is true. It can produce a beautifully written explanation. It can organize information into neat sections. It can give you examples. It can explain its reasoning. And it can do all of this while being wrong. That creates a strange psychological illusion. The answer looks like knowledge, it sounds like knowledge, it feels like knowledge, but the presentation of information isn't proof that the information is accurate. And your brain doesn't always separate those two things perfectly. Imagine someone tells you a complicated scientific fact. They stumble over their words, they pause, they say they're not completely sure. Now imagine someone else tells you the exact same fact, but they speak confidently, they explain it smoothly, they give you 3 examples. They never hesitate, even if both people have exactly the same level of knowledge, the second person may appear more credible. That's the power of presentation. And AI is exceptionally good at presentation. It doesn't get tired of explaining. It doesn't become frustrated because you've asked the same question 3 times. It doesn't lose its train of thought because you're asking follow-up questions. It can instantly rewrite an explanation to make it sound simpler, more professional, more persuasive, or more detailed. This creates something that feels almost like an expert conversation. And the smoother that conversation becomes, the easier it can be to forget that you're interacting with a system that can still make mistakes. Now here's where things become even more interesting. AI doesn't just communicate information, it communicates information in a social format. A chat window, a conversation, a response directed specifically at you. And humans are extremely sensitive to social signals. We naturally look for intention behind communication. When someone responds to us, we instinctively interpret their words. Are they confident? Are they uncertain? Are they friendly? Are they trying to help? Do they understand what I'm asking? These judgments happen incredibly quickly, and when AI begins producing human-like responses, some of those same instincts can become relevant. You might say, "I don't understand." And AI doesn't simply repeat the exact same sentence, it changes the explanation. You might say, "That's not what I meant," and it adjusts. You might ask it to explain something like you're 5 years old, and suddenly the language becomes simpler. Ask it to sound like an expert, and the tone changes again. This responsiveness makes the interaction feel personal, and personalization can increase the feeling that the system understands you. But here's the important distinction. A system can respond appropriately to your words without understanding you in the same way another human does. It can produce language that sounds empathetic without experiencing empathy. It can apologize without feeling regret. It can sound confident without possessing human certainty. It can explain an idea without having human consciousness behind the explanation, but your brain doesn't necessarily pause to analyze all of those distinctions every time you interact with it. Your brain is built to interpret communication quickly, and when something communicates like a person, it can become psychologically easier to relate to it like a person. Researchers studying AI trust have found that human-like characteristics can influence how people perceive and trust AI. That doesn't mean everyone automatically trusts an AI simply because it sounds human. The effect depends on the person, the situation, and the type of interaction. But the pattern reveals something important. The more human-like the interaction feels, the more familiar the psychological experience can become. And familiarity matters. Think about the difference between using an unfamiliar machine and talking to something that responds naturally. The machine feels distant. The conversation feels engaging. One feels like a tool. The other can start feeling like an assistant. And that difference can change how you behave. You may ask more questions. You may share more information. You may follow recommendations more easily. You may stop thinking of every response as a piece of raw machine output. Instead, you begin thinking of it as advice, and that's a major psychological shift, because information and advice don't feel exactly the same. Information says, "Here are some facts." Advice says, "Based on your situation, here's what you should consider doing." The second one feels more personal, and personal guidance can feel more trustworthy. This is where another phenomenon enters the story: automation bias. Humans have long been known to sometimes rely too heavily on automated recommendations. When a system provides a suggestion, people may accept it instead of independently checking the information themselves. The problem becomes especially interesting with generative AI. Because traditional automation often feels mechanical, AI doesn't. It talks, it explains, it adapts, it answers follow-up questions. It can sound like it is reasoning alongside you, so imagine two systems giving you the same recommendation. The first simply displays, "Recommendation, option B." The second says, "Based on the information you've provided, option B appears to be the strongest choice because of these 3 factors." The second response feels more thoughtful. It feels more personalized. It feels like something actually considered your situation. And that feeling can influence how much weight you give the recommendation. This is where AI becomes more than a search tool. It becomes a decision-making partner, and that can be incredibly useful. But it can also create a problem, because the more useful a system becomes, the easier it is to rely on it. And the more you rely on it, the less often you may stop to question it. That's the beginning of a feedback loop. AI gives you a useful answer. You save time, you feel satisfied. You return to AI the next time you have a question. It gives you another useful answer. Your confidence in the system grows. And eventually, the question may no longer be, "Is this answer correct?" It becomes, "Why wouldn't I trust it?" That is a much more powerful psychological position, because now, trust isn't being created by one answer. It's being created by repetition. And once that trust becomes familiar, something even more dangerous can happen. You can start believing that because AI is usually useful, it must also be reliable when it really matters. But those are not the same thing. A tool can be useful most of the time and still be dangerously wrong at exactly the moment you fail to verify it. And that leads to the next problem. The most difficult AI mistakes aren't always the obvious ones. They're the mistakes hidden inside answers that are almost completely correct. And that's where the real danger begins. Because the machine doesn't just give you answers. It talks to you. And the moment AI starts sounding human, your brain can stop treating it like a simple machine. Think about what happens during a normal conversation. When another person responds to you, your brain doesn't just process the words. It also tries to understand the person behind those words. Are they confident? Are they confused? Are they trying to help? Do they understand what you're saying? Are they being honest? These judgments happen so naturally that you rarely notice them. Humans are built for social interaction. We're constantly reading faces, voices, expressions, language, tone, and behavior. Now put that same brain in front of an AI that communicates almost like a person. You ask a question. It responds. You disagree. It explains. You say you don't understand. It changes the explanation. You ask for a different perspective. It gives you one. You tell it something was wrong, it can apologize and try again. Suddenly, the experience doesn't feel like using a traditional computer. It feels like talking to something. And that distinction matters, because your brain has spent your entire life learning how to interpret other people. It hasn't spent thousands of years learning how to interpret artificial intelligence. So when a machine communicates using familiar human patterns, your brain may use some of the same shortcuts it uses during human interaction. This is known as anthropomorphism. In simple terms, it's the tendency to give human-like qualities to something that isn't human. We do this all the time. People talk to their cars. They get angry at their phones. They give names to virtual assistants. They say their computer is having a bad day. These behaviors may seem silly, but they reveal something important about the human mind. We naturally search for human qualities in things that communicate with us. And modern AI gives our brains much more material to work with. An AI can respond to your personality. It can change its tone. It can remember the context of a conversation. It can write like a teacher, a coach, a friend, an analyst, or even a therapist-like conversational partner. The technology doesn't actually become human, but the interaction can become human-like, and that can change how we perceive it. Research into AI trust has found that human-like characteristics can influence people's perceptions of AI and their willingness to trust or use it. The more human-like the interaction feels, the more familiar the psychological experience can become. And familiarity matters. Think about the difference between using an unfamiliar machine and talking to something that responds naturally. The machine feels distant. The conversation feels engaging. One feels like a tool. The other can start feeling like an assistant. And that difference can change how you behave. You may ask more questions. You may share more information. You may stop thinking of every response as a piece of raw machine output. Instead, you begin thinking of it as advice. Information says, here are some facts. Advice says, based on your situation, here's what you should consider doing. This is where another phenomenon enters the story: automation bias. Humans rely too heavily on automated recommendations. When a system provides a suggestion, people may accept it instead of independently checking the information themselves. The problem becomes especially interesting with generative AI, because traditional automation often feels mechanical. AI doesn't. It talks, it explains, it adapts, it answers follow-up questions. It can sound like it is reasoning alongside you. So imagine two systems. The first displays recommendation option B. The second says, option B appears to be the strongest choice because... The second response feels more thoughtful. It feels like something actually considered your situation. This is where AI becomes more than a search tool. It becomes a decision-making partner, and that can be incredibly useful. But it can also create a problem, because the more useful a system becomes, the easier it is to rely on it, and the more you rely on it, the less often you may stop to question it. That's the beginning of a feedback loop. AI gives you a useful answer. You save time, you feel satisfied. You return to AI the next time you have a question. Eventually, the question may no longer be, is this answer correct? It becomes, why wouldn't I trust it? Because now trust isn't being created by one answer. It's being created by repetition. A tool can be useful most of the time and still be dangerously wrong at exactly the moment you fail to verify it. The most difficult AI mistakes aren't always obvious. They're hidden inside answers that are almost completely correct. And that's where the real danger begins. And that's where the next psychological trap begins. Because the most difficult AI mistakes aren't necessarily the answers that are completely wrong. They're the answers that are almost right. Imagine an AI gives you 10 different claims. 9 of them are accurate, 1 is wrong. Would you notice the mistake? Maybe. But here's the problem. The 9 correct claims can make the 10th one feel credible. Your brain doesn't always examine every statement as if it were completely independent. Instead, it often creates an overall impression. This sounds knowledgeable. This seems reasonable. I've heard something like this before, and once that impression forms, individual claims can become easier to accept. This is one reason polished AI answers can be so convincing. The problem isn't always misinformation that looks obviously false. Sometimes the problem is information that looks almost indistinguishable from the truth. A wrong answer that sounds ridiculous is easy to reject. A wrong answer that sounds professional is much harder. And AI can produce professional-sounding language almost instantly. It can organize an argument. It can provide examples. It can explain complicated concepts. It can use technical vocabulary. It can even present a balanced-looking discussion with advantages and disadvantages. Everything about the response can communicate credibility. But credibility and accuracy are different things. And this creates what we can think of as the 95% truth problem. Imagine someone gives you a document that is almost entirely correct. You read the first few paragraphs. Everything checks out. You recognize several facts. The explanation makes sense. You become comfortable with the source. Then, hidden somewhere in the middle, there is one important mistake. Because the surrounding information was accurate, you may be less likely to question the mistake. The correct information creates a kind of psychological cushion around the incorrect information. And AI can make this especially difficult because it can produce enormous amounts of information very quickly. The more information you receive, the harder it becomes to independently verify every individual claim. You might read 10 paragraphs and think, this is obviously well researched, but how do you know? Did you verify the sources? Did you check the original research? Did you compare the claim with an independent authority? Or did the structure of the answer simply make it feel reliable? This is where the difference between information and verification becomes critical. AI can give you information, but you are still responsible for deciding whether that information deserves your trust. And that becomes especially important when the consequences of being wrong are serious. Think about financial decisions, medical information, legal questions, academic research, news, business decisions, anything involving real money, real people, or significant consequences. In those situations, a confident answer isn't enough. You need evidence. You need context, and sometimes you need a human expert. But there's another reason people can become over-reliant on AI. It isn't just that AI gives convenient answers. It's that AI can gradually become part of your normal decision-making process. Think about what happens when you use a navigation app. At first, you might pay close attention to the route. After using it hundreds of times, you barely think about it. You simply follow the directions. The system has become part of your routine. AI can develop a similar relationship with your thinking. At first, you might question everything. You might check every answer. But then AI gets something right. And then another thing and another. It saves you time, it makes difficult tasks easier, it helps you organize your thoughts, it becomes useful, and usefulness builds familiarity. Familiarity builds confidence. Confidence increases reliance. And increased reliance can reduce independent checking. That's the feedback loop. And the scary part is that it doesn't require you to believe AI is perfect. You can know perfectly well that AI makes mistakes. You can even tell other people to fact-check AI. but your behavior can still change because the system has become convenient. Think about your smartphone. You know the battery can die. You know GPS can make mistakes. You know autocorrect can change your words. But you don't manually verify every notification, every map direction, or every corrected sentence. Why? Because the system has become part of your normal environment. The same thing can happen with AI. The more ordinary it becomes, the less psychological resistance you may have toward using it. And that changes the question. At first you ask, can I trust AI? Later you ask, can AI help me? Eventually, you may not ask either question, you simply use it. That's when convenience can quietly become dependence, and dependence doesn't always look dramatic. It can look like asking AI what to write, then what to study, then what to buy, then how to solve a problem, then what decision to make. One decision at a time, each one seems harmless. But over time, you may begin outsourcing more and more of the thinking process. And there is a subtle cost. When you constantly let something else generate the first answer, you get less practice generating your own. When you constantly accept the recommendation, you get less practice evaluating alternatives. When you constantly ask for the conclusion, you may spend less time learning how to reach the conclusion yourself. The goal isn't to avoid AI. That would be unrealistic. The goal is to avoid turning a thinking tool into a replacement for thinking, because AI is incredibly good at helping you move faster. But moving faster isn't always the same as thinking better. And that brings us to the most important question of this entire documentary. If you already know AI can be wrong, if you know it can sound confident, if you know it can make mistakes, then why isn't that knowledge enough to protect you? The answer is surprisingly simple. Knowing that you should verify something doesn't mean you will actually verify it, especially when verification takes effort, especially when the answer already feels right, and especially when you've used the system dozens of times before without a problem. So the real danger isn't that AI will make you believe everything. The real danger is that it will make checking feel unnecessary. And once that happens, the smartest thing you can do isn't to panic, it's to build a better habit. A simple mental checkpoint that forces your brain to slow down before accepting the answer. Because the final question isn't whether AI can be useful. It obviously can. The question is whether you know when usefulness should end and verification should begin. The question is whether you know when usefulness should end and verification should begin. And fortunately, you don't need to become an AI expert. You don't need to distrust every answer, fact-check every sentence, or stop using AI. Instead, you need a simple mental checkpoint. 3 questions. 3 questions that can interrupt the automatic feeling that an AI answer must be correct, simply because it sounds convincing. The first, what evidence supports this? Don't just ask AI to repeat the answer. Ask where the information came from. Ask what evidence supports the claim and for reliable sources. When the subject is important, go to the original source. There's a huge difference between an AI telling you something is true and you actually confirming it. The second question is even more powerful. What could make this answer wrong? This changes the conversation. You're asking the AI to challenge itself. What assumptions is it making? What information is missing? What alternative explanations exist? Humans naturally look for information that supports what they already believe. Instead of asking, why is my theory correct? Try asking, what is the strongest argument against my theory? Use AI as a tool for challenging your thinking. Then there's the third question. Would I believe this if a stranger said it? Sometimes we're not convinced by evidence but by the polished presentation. The language sounds professional. The response feels personalized. We may give the information more credibility because of a futuristic design or an instant response. Imagine the AI answer without the interface. Just a paragraph on a blank page. Would you still accept it? Separate the answer from the feeling it creates. The human brain is good at generating feelings of confidence and understanding. Those are useful, but they aren't proof you can find AI useful without treating it as authoritative. That's calibrated trust, not blind trust, not blind distrust. Use AI where it is useful, question it where uncertainty matters, and verify when consequences are serious. Remember, an AI answer isn't a fact just because of perfect grammar or technical language. The most important skill is knowing when an answer deserves questioning. AI reduces friction, helping you research, write, and create faster. That's why it's easy to rely on. One shortcut becomes another until you stop noticing. Your brain is trying to save energy by recognizing patterns. The future challenge isn't humans versus machines. It's learning to work together without giving away our judgment. Our ability to say, wait, how do we know? That matters. Don't let convenience quietly replace judgment. The smartest person knows when to stop and ask. If this video made you look differently at AI, subscribe to Vibe Vault Facts. The most fascinating thing to study isn't the machine, it's the human mind using it.